I'm Shaun Haney, and this is RealAg on the Weekend. Let's get real and get connected with the week that was in Canadian agriculture. RealAg on the Weekend starts now. Welcome to RealAg on the Weekend here on 980 CJME and 650 CKOM. I'm your host, Shaun Haney of RealAgriculture.com. Hopefully you had yourself a really great week. It was definitely wet in parts of Saskatchewan. My son, who's playing for the Lethbridge Bulls, the WCBL, they were supposed to be in Regina on Thursday night and got terribly rained out. So parts of the province definitely getting some rain. We're going to talk about some of the crop conditions here in a second. I want to encourage you to go to RealAgriculture.com to keep up to date with the latest insight and information on things that are happening in agriculture. And if you don't get our free e-newsletter that comes out every single weekday morning as well as on Saturdays, go to RealAgriculture.com/subscribe, and you can get that Western e-newsletter. Okay, today on the show, we're gonna give a bit of an update on crop conditions here from the Saskatchewan government. We're also going to hear from John Barlow. He's the Shadow Minister for Agriculture for the Conservative Party of Canada. I had John on the RealAg Radio podcast this week. Bit of a round-the-horn rapid fire with John. We'll hear about a number of issues there, including some of the cuts the federal government has made to 4-H. I know that's got many stakeholders in the industry quite upset about. The Conservatives say they're going to basically refund 4-H if they make the next government. We're also going to hear from 10 organizations who have signed a letter that was sent to the government this week, specifically the Finance Minister, Chrystia Freeland, calling for fixes to the proposed capital gains changes. So we'll talk about that issue. And then we're going to finish up with a conversation about rental agreements and some of the price escalation that farmers are experiencing when it does come to those rental agreements. We've got some new data from RealAgristudies, and you're going to hear a portion of a discussion that we had on the RealAg Radio podcast on Friday. Stuart Person from MNP joined us. And we're going to go over that data and what it means. And there's kind of a few surprising data points there that I want your feedback on as well. If you have any feedback on today's show, we'd love to hear from you. You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find Real Agriculture across all the different social media platforms. Or you can call the RealAg feedback line. That number is 855-776-6147. Well, on Thursday, we had a new crop report for Saskatchewan come out. And according to the crop report, producers made significant progress this week, I should say, with seeding now 77% complete. This is behind the 5-year average of 91% and the 10-year average of 89%. Crop emergence is reported as excellent to good condition, and topsoil moisture shows improvement over the past year. Well, that wouldn't be hard. I would expect that. The question is a little bit here, especially in certain parts of the province. At what point is it like sort of we're waving the white flag a little bit and saying, hey, stop? We've been under such drought conditions. It's hard to say that, but I think we also want to finish seeding, and we want to turn the temperature up. We really haven't had a lot of heat yet. There's been a few warm days, but we really haven't got that sort of summer vibe at all here yet, and that's been kind of missing. So hopefully that does change around. The report continues. Provincially, seeding progress is the furthest ahead for field peas and lentils at 92% and 91% complete, respectively. Chickpeas and soybeans are reported at 78% and 51%. For cereal crops, durum and spring wheat are the furthest ahead at 87% and 84%, respectively. And also, finally, barley is at 76%, followed by oats. Oats is at 67%. So that's the update depending on the crops that you are growing. Now, from a grass perspective, boy, is that ever looking better. I had a chance to catch up with Prince Albert rancher and farmer Tim Alexkin earlier this week, and here's what he had to say about some of the conditions outside.
Yeah, honestly it is. And to the point where, people are looking at and saying, hey, should we add a little fertilizer to that? I mean, really make things balance and get a response to it. And it's just, it opens up so many avenues of hope and people go, I say filling the bags of money, Shaun, and stuff like that. But it's an amazing start compared to so many other years that have been dismal, absolutely dismal. And you try and be positive on that, and it's tough to do that when the past year has been kicking you down so bad. But it's beautiful grass, and not just not just in our northern area all the time, but from here to the grasslands to, your part of the world, and, and such a vast, large area of people that had no hope for so long. And it's like, holy mackerel, this, crack the wine, eh? Let's enjoy this. I mean, we can you can sit on the fence and watch it instead of adding more fence to expand your reach.
Meanwhile, I saw a tweet from Jocelyn Wasco, rancher with her husband Travis down in East End, Saskatchewan. A great picture of raining again on Friday, and so green. I don't know if East End has been this green. I don't know how many years it's been, but it's been a while. Great to see. And again, I make the mention about heat. We're really in need of that heat. And now that we have some moisture and soil conditions are much better than they were, say, a year ago, if we get some heat now, we're really going to see not only that crop launch forward, but we're also going to see that grass really get going. So it is, honestly, I think it's great to see. We're not out of a drought condition in some parts yet. There still is more work to do, of course, to really recharge that soil profile from a moisture perspective. So there's still work to be done. We still need Mother Nature to cooperate. But it feels like we're off to a much better start in 2024 than we thought we were going to have if you go back 6 months ago. Okay, let's take a break. And when we come back, we're going to hear from the Shadow Minister of Agriculture, John Barlow. He's with the Conservative Party of Canada, and he'll join us here on 650 CKOM, 980 CJME.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
There's a reason we call it the Corn School. Videos on everything from planter setup to weed control, field trial results, and the latest yield strategies. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF. Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast in your favorite podcast app. Check out the latest Corn School episode today.
You deal with many uncertainties on your farm, and managing risk should not be one of them. MNP's Ag Team specializes in risk management. Visit mnp.ca to learn how you can stay ahead of the game and plan for the unknown.
Mentioned in the prior segment about how it needs to heat up. During the commercial break, I looked at the forecast for Saskatoon, just as an example. Between now and the 14th of June, 2 weeks out, we don't get over 23 degrees. So nicer, but not necessarily the kind of heat maybe we're really looking for. But hey, that'll be good for crops. Still mild temperatures, but we would like to see it more than I think that 25, 26 range at this time of the year. So we need to dry up a little bit in some parts so people can finish seeding. It's supposed to be quite windy in the middle of next week, so we'll see if that does come through after a chance of showers on Monday and Tuesday in parts of the province. Okay, I had a chance to catch up with John Barlow. He is the Shadow Minister of Agriculture for the Conservative Party of Canada. We did a quick round the horn on a number of different topics. Let's hear what he had to say. I think I saw you in the House of Commons talking about a story that Real Agriculture broke going back a number of months ago, and that has to do with the funding of 4-H. And I found it interesting why last week was this coming back to the forefront, and two, big promise in terms of if the Conservative Party becomes the next government, saying we're going to refund 4-H. Well, why is this such an issue right now?
Well, it's such an important program, and we have a process that we go through to ensure that we have the support of our entire caucus when we take a position on an issue. So had caucus meetings and those types of things to go over what our position on this would be. But it was unanimous. There was no question that our team wanted to reverse the funding cut to 4-H and restore that historic funding to a program which we know is extremely successful. Where we have tens of thousands of youth every year learning about community and leadership and food production and helping to educate Canadians about where our food comes from, which I think is a critical topic where more Canadians need to understand modern Canadian agriculture, where their food comes from, and the importance of sustainability in food production.
Yeah, my personal opinion, it felt like a weird stand to take for the current government in terms of cuts at this time to 4-H. But we're at a period where I think there's a lot of organizations that rely on government funding or even corporate funding to survive that are under some hard-pressed times here right now, John.
Yeah, there's no question. And one of the reasons that took us a little bit of time to come up with a statement is that we know the financial situation that we are going to inherit should we form the next government. And we wanted to make sure that there was funding available to restore that funding to 4-H. And we found, several millions of dollars that Ag Canada is paying consultants. And we believe that that's an easy place to find the money to fund programs like 4-H and Ag in the Classroom, which we understand has also seen its funding reduced. These are fundamental programs which have been proven to be successful. And I just believe it's a priority for us to continue to educate Canadians about modern Canadian agriculture, and these programs are pivotal in doing that. And I think that's where the priority should be, not on consultants that are doing the jobs that staff at AFC should be doing.
Well, I want to switch gears here a little bit to the Grocery Code of Conduct. Of course, food affordability is a big, important issue for Canadians. There's no doubt about it. Why does the Conservative Party support the Grocery Code of Conduct, and what actually would this do if enabled?
Well, I think that's a great question, and the timing is excellent in that I think the perception around the Grocery Code of Conduct has been warped a little bit. The current government is painting, and the NDP to some extent, is painting the Grocery Code of Conduct as this salve that is going to reduce grocery prices. That's not what the Grocery Code of Conduct was initially meant to be, nor do I believe that is going to solve that problem. The Grocery Code of Conduct was, and why we support it, is it's going to put a framework around how retailers are treating the producers in terms of fines and late fees and transportation fees. It is supposed to be a protection for those fruit and vegetable producers more so than anyone on how they're being treated by the processors and the retailers. That was the impetus and the idea around the Grocery Code of Conduct. This is not going to be some magic elixir that is going to reduce grocery prices. And I find it disingenuous from the government's perspective that they're putting this out there, that if we get Walmart and Loblaws to sign on to the Grocery Code of Conduct, which is voluntary, not mandatory, that this is somehow going to lower grocery prices. I don't believe that that's going to be the case. It's still very important. It's still a tool that is going to ensure that producers are treated fairly by those large retailers. But I don't believe that this is all of a sudden going to be a magic change for grocery prices.
Does the Conservative Party believe there needs to be more grocery competition in the market, as the government has claimed they're trying to do some recruiting?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. There is competition. However, the competition is owned by, or dominated by 5 large retailers. But we are seeing, like Fresco in Alberta start to really, or the Friesen Brothers, in Alberta start to gain some real traction. So I think there are some opportunities there, and to follow that model. But yeah, I think there definitely needs to be increased competition. That's the way you drive down prices. And hopefully we'll start to see that develop. But again, as the industry minister is saying, he's inviting all of these foreign industries into Canada, or foreign retailers into Canada. They're not going to come if there are regulatory hurdles to getting started in Canada. I think there's going to be much more work to be done to entice additional competition in Canada to make them realize that this is a market that's worth entering.
Passion project for you is this Bill C-276, the farm trespassing bill. What are your expectations as the Senate looks at that private member's bill?
Well, I'll be in the Senate testifying to the bill on Thursday morning. I'm optimistic. We obviously the animal rights groups are being active on this, but I'm hoping that the Senate realizes, this isn't a bill an ag gag law, which is being called. This does not do anything to prevent protesting on public property. But as we're seeing right now with the avian flu, H5N1 within dairy cattle, certainly the concern around African swine fever, that there are some lines that we cannot cross when it comes to protecting our biosecurity on farms. There was a report out of California this week that showed that they have connected or have likely connected an outbreak of avian flu to trespassers that resulted in the culling of 250,000 birds in California. So we know this can happen. We need to take the steps to ensure that we do not allow that to happen, protect our food supply, protect our farming industry, and we just simply cannot afford to have a massive outbreak of one of these animal-borne diseases. And let's just take every precaution we can to put protections in place. And again, I want to be crystal clear here. This does not prevent animal rights groups from doing their job, and they have a role to play. But farmers and farm employees have a legal obligation to report any abuses or things or practices that are putting animal health at risk. So those things don't change. They can still protest on public property, but there's got to be a line in the sand, and that line is trespassing onto private property without having a comprehensive understanding of the very strict biosecurity protocols we have in place.
Are you pleased, satisfied, or critical of CFIA's response to HPAI and some of the infections we've seen in U.S. dairy animals? Are we on the right track in terms of how our response and trying to protect the Canadian industry?
We had an in-camera meeting on Thursday with representatives of Ag Canada, CFIA, CBSA. Taking their word for it, they seem to feel that they have this well in hand in terms of their monitoring and working with their colleagues on the southern side of the border. I think this is something we need to continue to monitor now that we have another farm employee in Michigan that has been infected. I think if we learned anything from COVID, we can't take any of these things lightly. Let's be as diligent as we possibly can. But it seems as of right now, they seem to have this in hand. I think the one area which I am concerned about is our lack of a stockpile of vaccines. It seems like we're not being as proactive as I think we should be. The perspective we're kind of hearing from CFIA is that, if this should happen, we will react. I don't know if that's really the smart play right now. I think it's inevitable with how this is spreading that we will likely have this in Canada. So let's be prepared and let's start procuring some of that vaccine now.
And finally, John, I know you got to run here, but wanted to get an update, the latest on C-234. This is one that Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has really grabbed hold of, as of other members of the party. Haven't heard much in the last few weeks. Where's this at?
Well, it's kind of making its way back through the House of Commons. We are still working very hard to try and come to a deal with the Bloc to get them back on side. Losing the Bloc support on 234 has been difficult in terms that it will not pass without their support. It will pass as amended, but we obviously want to return 234 to its original form. To leave out the heating and cooling of barns, I don't think is fair, and we do not want to divide our agriculture community. Greenhouses would be left out, ranchers would be left out, poultry producers. I understand from our grain guys that they want that coverage for grain drying, but that's not going to be a huge issue until the fall. So we want to use as much runway as we can to try and get this back to where it will actually have a meaningful impact.
Yeah, grain drying is one sliver, one path. There's other parts of the industry that are impacted here. For
sure.
That was John Barlow. He is Shadow Minister of Agriculture for the Conservative Party of Canada. When we come back here on RealAg on the weekend, we're going to talk about the letter written by 10 farm organizations about the capital gains changes that are potentially coming to Canada. What's up with that? What do they want to see fixed? You're listening to RealAg on the weekend. Of course, we are here on 650 CKOM and 980 CJA.
Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube or visit RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
We were hearing from John Barlow in the previous segment, and the House Ag Committee came out with 10 recommendations for trying to fix some of the food price volatility and escalation that the country has experienced. It was interesting, even after the Ag Committee themselves came up with that there hasn't been like collusion or price fixing happening and these abnormal profits out there across grocers. Still 3 of the 10 points still address or are really tailored towards grocers getting in line. So it's just interesting that it continues to be very, very much in the narrative. Let's stick with Ottawa here for a second. And 10 national farm and commodity organizations are raising concerns about the federal government's plan to increase the capital gains tax inclusion rate and related tax policy changes that were announced in the 2024 budget last month. You can find this story by going to RealAgriculture.com, and it's in the news section. So the organizations, including the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, Canadian Canola Growers Association, Canadian Cattle Association, and the Grain Growers of Canada, sent a joint letter to the Ministers of Finance, National Revenue, and Agriculture and Agri-Food earlier this week, proposing several changes to the government's plan to collect more tax revenue on capital gains. Now, there's an interesting piece coming up here in a second, but related to this week with the Standing Committee on Agriculture. But the groups acknowledge the increase to the lifetime capital gains exemption to $1.25 million. That was also announced in the budget, but they say they are concerned the increase to the capital gains inclusion rate from 1/2 to 2/3 will nullify the increase to the lifetime exemption while hurting young farmers' ability to buy farm assets and undermining Bill C-208, which became law in 2021. Quote here from the letter that they had all signed. Our concern is that by increasing the capital gains inclusion rate to 2/3, we are neutralizing the increase to the LCGE threshold, undermining policy intent of C-208, and jeopardizing the success of genuine intergenerational farm transfers to young farmers across the country. So when asked at the House of Commons Ag Committee meeting on Thursday whether the agricultural sector had been consulted on the tax policy changes, Agriculture Minister Lawrence MacAulay acknowledged he was not aware the capital gains changes would be included in the budget. Here's that audio.
Yes or no?
I'm not very keen on this yes or no stuff, but the thing is, did I know what was going in the budget before it went in the budget? No.
Well, you didn't know. You yourself, Minister, did not know this was going to be in budget 2024.
I do not write the budget.
Okay, thank you very much. That's interesting.
That was an interesting exchange. So in the joint letter to Minister Freeland, Bibeau, and MacAulay, the farm groups asked the government to take the following steps to alleviate their concerns. Now, I'm going to go through a little bit of the list here, but also remember, so Minister MacAulay may not have known what was in the budget before it was released, but surely former Ag Minister Marie-Claude Bebeau knew. She's now the Minister of Revenue. So that's what goes under that is the CRA. That's one of the reasons why this letter was written to her. Also, capital gains changes would fit into her spectrum, her area of responsibility. So she would know the impact that these changes would have on agriculture because she was the ag minister, obviously, at one time before Minister McCauley, as he referred to that committee meeting, his sabbatical as ag minister, which I thought was kind of funny. The effective implementation date of these measures be postponed from June 25th of 24 until at least January 1st of 25 to allow for more in-depth consultation with affected parties. On Friday's show, we heard from the Real Ag Radio podcast, we heard Stuart Person, who is Senior Vice President of Agriculture for MNP. He talked about how there's a flood of clients coming in to do estate freezes because of some of these changes, which are kind of happening prior to this even becoming legislation. So there's a lot of guesswork at play here. This has been a big boom for the government when it comes to tax revenues because there has been so many capital gains executed because people trying to do things like freezes and transfers before these capital gains changes happen. So it has been fruitful for the government from a revenue perspective, just the threat of the change. Second point was that the Canadian Entrepreneurs Incentive announced in the budget include not only first-generation farm businesses, but also be made available to successive generations of farm families. 3, that all BC 208 eligible intergenerational farm transfers in Canada continue to fall under the old 1/2 inclusion rate under the Income Tax Act. Next, that any capital gains eligible for the lifetime capital gains exemption be excluded from the calculation of the alternative minimum tax, even if the exemption is not claimed. And finally, that the Canadian Entrepreneurs Incentive not discriminate against businesses employing diverse operating structures, such as holding companies, for a variety of business planning based on years, if not decades, of tax advice. The letter also said, we need to ensure that the proposed personal income tax measures announced in the budget 2024 do not jeopardize the transfer of assets from one generation of farmer to another, but rather encourage the next generation of farmers to take up the calling, drive much-needed rural economic activity, and help the agriculture sector reach its growth potential. There's on our website, RealAgriculture.com, we have a full list of all the signatories of it's a big cross-section. It's not just grain farmers, not just cattle producers. It's a very large cross-section of organizations. On the Real Ag Radio podcast, I asked Kelvin Hepner from Real Agriculture, does he think that this is still going to go through? The government's faced a lot of pushback on this capital gains change. We also saw record foreign investment leaving Canada, a significant amount, the most seen in 14 years, I believe, in one quarter. A lot of concern as Canada tries to attract capital to the country and build an entrepreneurial culture, and this is not helping based on a lot of anecdotal feedback that I've heard. Kelvin said that he does believe the government's going to move forward on this. One of the big questions is there has been some exclusion for the tech sector, my understanding is, but will there be exclusion for the agriculture sector? The letter kind of hints at this or touches on from the sense of, if you're concerned about not enough young people in the industry, this is probably not really helping that matter. So the question is does the government have the intestinal fortitude to move forward? They're talking about making a more fair tax system in Canada. This is one of the components of that. They've also talked a lot about how it really impacts a small number of the percentage of the population on a yearly basis. And so it would look like the government is going to move forward, and they're talking about making this a separate bill than the budget bill because they want the Conservatives to have to take a stand against it so they can say that Conservatives really are in favor of not taxing the more wealthy of Canadians and making them pay their fair share. So that's going to be the narrative. I'm painting the picture for you here, what's at work from a political side. That's what you can expect here going forward. So we'll see if Mr. Bebeau, Finance Minister Freeland, and Agriculture Minister Lawrence McCauley listen or take the letter from the farm organizations to heart. We'll have to see. Okay, let's take a break. When we come back here on Real Ag on the Weekend, we're going to talk about rental agreements. We're seeing some escalation of prices in Canada. Shouldn't be shocking to you, but maybe the amount it could be. You're listening to Real Ag on the Weekend. Of course, we're on 980 CJME and 650 CQA.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomists, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomists with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by BASF and Syngenta Canada.
We got a new poll up at RealAgriculture.com, basically asking you, when you do finish seeding, or if you have finished seeding, or eventually when that happens, how do you celebrate? Is there something you do on an annual basis, a bit of a tradition? Maybe it's a quick little camping trip. Maybe it's a little bit of some cold ones in the shop with some neighbors. Whatever it is. Curious what that is, and we'd love you to share it. And if you can vote in the poll, you go to realagriculture.com, scroll down, you can vote in the free poll. And then if you want to tell me about it, I would love to be able to share some of those experiences on this show as well. You can do that by emailing me at shaney@realagriculture.com. A little bit of adversity in this spring. Right? It's been a little bit different than some of the past ones where it's so dry, we just go and we're done. We're going to see a real intersection here of seeding and spraying. They're going to kind of fall on top of each other. This is where your logistical wit will definitely come into play as you try to plan out logistically what needs to happen on the farm on a daily basis. Well, on Friday, we had a discussion on the Real Ag Radio podcast about some new RealAgristudies data relative to land rental agreements. And myself, Kelvin Hepner, as well as Stuart Person, who is the Senior Vice President with MNP, we talked about some of the data and what some of the signals are. Speaking of market research, Stuart, in April in the Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index, we asked some questions in collaboration with MNP about land rental agreements, and I found it interesting. And you have maybe a better handle on this from your side of the equation as an accountant, but we asked, are you planning to renew any land rental agreements this year? And 55% said yes. Does that number, that seemed high to me, but maybe I'm just missing something. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it does seem a little high. I mean, you would think most farmers would be into multi-year agreements. I know there are some that are year to year, but for the most part, we would see 3-year, 5-year rental agreements in place. So I don't know if it was just luck of the draw that a bunch came due this year, or if it was the spike in commodity prices that was pressuring farmers to maybe go renew early because they didn't want to feel, they didn't want their landlord feeling like they were being taken advantage of, or I'm not sure. But definitely a higher number than I would have expected on a 1-year basis.
Yeah. So what do you expect to happen to the price of your land rent? 53% said it's going to increase. So for the people that said it's going to increase, we had 82% saying somewhere between 1 and 24%. And Stuart, 18% of people said land rent was going to be going up between 25 and 50%. That's 18% of those people said it's going up 25 to 50%.
Yeah.
That gets your attention.
I know it does. And I'm not totally surprised by that, actually, just given where we saw commodity prices in the last 3 years. And then Ritchie Brothers has done some auctions across the country on land rents, and we've seen some numbers, which has given some price discovery information to landlords. And we've seen rents go, 2 or more times where they would have been otherwise. And so I'm not surprised to see that we're seeing that sizable amount of increases. The big picture here, though, is I'm concerned about what that does to cost of production. I'm concerned for producers who are maybe locking these in for 3 or 5 years at really high rates. We have no idea where the commodity markets are going. I just worry that we've got a number of producers now locked into too high a cost of production, and are they going to make any money on this land? Don't know.
Yeah, and of course, go ahead, Calvin. Go ahead.
I was going to say, are we seeing the rental market adjust here to higher interest rates and purchasing costs on buying land, where, say, with higher interest rates now, your land payments on an annual basis might be $600 where they used to be $300, then renting maybe looks a little bit more reasonable, and if you're looking to expand.
Oh, absolutely, Calvin, you're bang on that one. I mean, we on our farm, we always did the math, say what's the interest rate, and then look at the price you're paying per acre for land. And if your interest was going to be lower than the rent cost, then you obviously would buy that land, right? And I think in this case, it's gotten way more expensive to buy land now with interest rates up, and land prices have also gone up at the same time, right? And so, yeah, I mean, it's definitely having an impact. I still don't know if it's for certain not making sense to buy land in some areas now in terms of what your productive capacity is on your farm. But even paying a higher rent, is start to make you scratch your head as to what exactly are we doing here. But in the agriculture, one of the challenges we have is we don't always know what the markets are going to do next year or the year after. And so those who have high optimism will maybe pay a little more because they think it's going to get better. And then the other thing I would point out is, we see cost of production vary widely from farm to farm. So there are farms out there who are very good at managing their cost of production, and therefore they would be able to pay a little higher rent than some others.
That was audio from the RealAg Radio podcast on Friday. In the U.S., we've also seen strong land prices as well. I believe the 2023 number slowed down to 8%. Still a strong number when you think about investments. If I said, hey, 8%, it's down from a growth perspective, that you're feeling pretty good about yourself. Land has been a very good place to put your money. And so it makes sense with how expensive that has become. Renting more land is a different way to manage your cash flow and what you're doing with your money. And so we're seeing that increase as well. And of course, land rents can take up a really wide swath of different forms, right? We got cash rents, we got crop shares, and there's a whole bunch of other ways to structure those agreements, so that there is a lot of variability in that. One of the things I think for sure is that the more confident you are, like Stuart talked about, in terms of the market's going to turn around, and I think this applies maybe a little bit more to the U.S. side of the equation, is if you feel there's a backstop where it minimizes your downside. So you've got either, somebody, if agriculture goes in the tank, the government's going to do a bunch of payments, or you feel that maybe the farm subsidy programs or safety nets are strong enough to backstop any sort of a bad financial situation for you. It increases your optimism, your willingness to take risks on the upside. So I think that's a factor here as well. We'd love your feedback on all of this or any topic that we discuss here on RealAg on the Weekend. You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find Real Agriculture across any of the social media platforms. You're also welcome to call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Highly encourage you to go to realagriculture.com here while you got some free time. Catch up on all things agriculture, providing you with insights and information on what are the things that are impacting your farm businesses. So thank you so much, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg on the Weekend, and we'll see you next week.